powerful old woman stares jealously at the new slaves in the harem. When Valeria meets her eyes, she bows respectfully. Hurrem immediately picks her out and has servants dress her in a red silk dress embedded with jewels, then sends her to His Majesty's chamber to serve. Watching her husband, who is past middle age, get intimate with the young girl, Hurrem's heart is torn, but it is the only way to solidify her status. A few weeks ago, the doctor diagnosed Hurrem as having entered menopause. The symptoms of menopause have plunged Hurrem's mood to the bottom. She tries her best to conceal this news, fearing that Suleiman might despise her. Amid her unease, Suleiman's other sister, Fatma, arrives at the palace. Along with her comes Huricihan, the daughter of her former enemies, Ibrahim and Hatisi. Hurrem shudders involuntarily. On the surface, her sister-in-law Fatma is always smiling and friendly. Fatma is a real wolf in sheep's clothing, constantly plotting to put Hurrem to death in her heart. Because Fatma is a supporter of the eldest prince, Mustafa. Like her other sisters, she doesn't want Hurrem's children to ascend the throne. On her second day at the palace, Fatma discovers Hurrem's big secret. From the medicine boiled by the doctor, she detects a hint related to a woman's condition. After a friendly interrogation, the doctor is forced to reveal that Hurrem has entered menopause. Elated Fatma holds a grand banquet that very night, inviting all the women to attend. She pretends to feel sorry for Hurrem and consoles her, saying that every woman will reach the stage. In an instant, the menopause of His Majesty's favorite shocks the entire palace. Hurrem feels deeply humiliated and hides in her room, bursting into tears. Although Suleiman comforts her, saying it doesn't matter, his passionate love for her won't be reduced at all. Hurrem knows this is unrealistic. After all, as a monarch, he has the important task of continuing the dynasty and surely wants to have more children. Fatma precisely plans to take advantage of this to strike Hurrem. She selects a young and beautiful concubine from the harem. Fatma orders the maids to dress up the concubine and send her to His Majesty's bed. But her little trick is quickly detected by the jealous Hurrem. Hurrem bribes the eunuch, secretly kills that concubine, and then throws her body into the sea. However, this doesn't deter Fatma. There are thousands of other concubines in the harem. She could have sent them to His Majesty's bed one by one. Let's see how many more murders Hurrem dares to commit. Hurrem is on the verge of collapse. No matter how she dresses up, she can't hide her wrinkles and white hair. If one day Suleiman gets tired of her and becomes infatuated with a younger body, she simply won't have the ability to protect herself and her children. Rather than letting Fatma's loyalists climb into His Majesty's bed, it's better to send her own people, even if it means tearing her heart out herself. Early the next morning, Hurrem swallows his pride and asks Suleiman with a smile if he is satisfied with the concubine in his bed. Suleiman is pleased that she is no longer jealous. He praises her heartily. Even if all the women of the world were gathered together, the joy they could bring me would not be 1/10,000th of what you bring. But no sooner had Hurrem been relieved than Fatma irritated her again. Capturing a man's heart begins in his bed. The next step is to give him children. This is exactly the scene in Hurrem's nightmare. If His Majesty crowns another woman's son as his heir, she will never be able to turn things around. So she forbids Valeria to serve His Majesty again, in case she becomes pregnant. But Fatma secretly finds Valeria and offers her shelter. If you bear His Majesty's son, you will have endless jewels and wealth. Valeria, who was originally a servant, can't resist the temptation. She immediately betrays Hurrem and agrees to follow Fatma's instructions. From then on, Fatma frequently sends Valeria to His Majesty's chamber. Hurrem knows nothing about this because all her informants have been diverted by Fatma. After a period of time, Valeria successfully gets pregnant. Suleiman is overjoyed and rewards her with numerous jewels. On the surface, Hurrem shows concern for Valeria's health and teaches her precautions during pregnancy. But secretly, she assigns her maid to poison Valeria's tonic. However, when Suleiman comes to her to confide, she realizes she has done something wrong. Suleiman is still haunted by the death of his second son, Mehmet. This new baby might help him get out of the shadow. If the baby is gone, Suleiman may break down and decide he's no good as a father. How could Hurrem bear to let her beloved suffer such a blow again? She finds Diana as fast as she can and tells her to stop Valeria from drinking the poison. Fortunately, just as Valeria is about to put the spoon into her mouth, Diana snatches it away. Valeria thus narrowly escapes death thanks to Hurrem's momentary mercy. Out of love for Suleiman, Hurrem spares Valeria and endures her endless showing off. Fatma even deliberately flaunts in front of Hurrem that she is still young and can have children at any time. Her smile turns Hurrem's stomach. Hurrem asks the servants to dig up dirt on Fatma and find her weaknesses. After much inquiry, Aga finally uncovers the real reason behind Fatma's divorce. It turns out that Fatma didn't divorce because her husband cheated. Instead, Fatma secretly kept a lover outside. Hurrem goes to Fatma's ex-husband and shows concern. The ex-husband still hopes to get back together with Fatma, but this is not out of love, it's out of greed. Hurrem thinks it would be more disgusting to Fatma than killing her. To get rid of Fatma, Hurrem specially invites Fatma's ex-husband into the palace. Fatma's ex-husband lewdly says he doesn't care about Fatma's infidelity and wants to take her away to live together. Fatma is seething with anger and adamantly refuses. Hurrem threatens her, saying she will find her lover and expose her infidelity to the public. This hits Fatma's sore spot. She has to yield for the time being. So Fatma goes to His Majesty and says she wants to remarry her ex-husband. Suleiman, thinking she has real feelings for her ex-husband, readily approves. However, people with a sunny smile can reveal a heart of stone when the time comes. On the night of the wedding, an old, bald man is eager to climb onto the bride's bed. Fatma quickly dodges aside, saying it's not the right time yet. Let's fill our stomachs first. The groom greedily opens his mouth and swallows all the food the bride feeds him, not even realizing that the bride has given him a cup of poisoned wine. Fatma stays quietly beside the dead groom throughout the night. It's not until the next day that she feigns a look of horror and shouts for help. Seeing her heart-broken appearance, no one suspects that this is her doing, except for Hurrem. Fatma becomes a widow, so she doesn't have to leave the palace. Hurrem has no choice but to shift her target to another enemy, Prince Mustafa. She finds Rustem and asks him to find a way to assassinate Prince Mustafa. Not long after, Prince Mustafa leaves the royal palace and heads back to his remote province. The assassins trail them all the way to the campsite. In the middle of the night, while Prince Mustafa's guards sleep, the assassins launch an attack. The noise of the battle wakes Prince Mustafa. Prince Mustafa's concubine notices the hidden arrow and quickly jumps in front of him. She soon loses her breath, along with the baby in her womb. The guards catch the archer and learn that Rustem sent him to carry out the assassination. Prince Mustafa is extremely angry and vows to take revenge. He packs the assassin's head and sends it to Rustem as a warning. Prince Mustafa's supporter, the Admiral, subtly threatens Rustem to stop, otherwise he will surely throw Rustem to the dogs. Rustem is in constant fear, worried that he will be assassinated. Meanwhile, the Janissaries, another supporter of Prince Mustafa, also learn about the failed assassination. The Janissary commander can't tolerate this and intends to teach Rustem a lesson. The Janissary commander invites Rustem to have a meal in the barracks. With so many knives and hostile eyes, Rustem gets goosebumps all over his body. Worried that the food is poisoned, he lets his own guard taste it first. Unexpectedly, this action angers the Janissary commander. "You're insulting us. If we Janissaries want to take someone's life, we'll draw our swords, not use such despicable means as poisoning." Rustem flips the table and points out that the commander has crossed the line. To get out of there safely, he orders his guards to draw their swords and point them at the Janissaries. Word of their quarrel soon reaches Suleiman's ears. Suleiman angrily rebukes both sides. Infighting among his own people is like slapping Suleiman in the face. Subsequently, the admiral adds fuel to the fire and deliberately speaks ill of Rustem. The admiral's words carry a lot of weight in Suleiman's heart. After all, the admiral is his long-time friend, has accompanied him in numerous battles, contributing greatly to the expansion of the empire. So Suleiman is convinced that Rustem was wrong in this dinner incident. He scolds Rustem for being too arrogant. To cure Rustem of this bad habit, Suleiman orders him to be exiled to the border. This decision causes his wife, Princess Mirimah, great concern. That night, Princess Mirimah fakes an illness to win her father's sympathy. Suleiman has no choice but to agree to let Rustem stay temporarily to take care of her. Rustem, having escaped the disaster, does not want to sit back. He plans to take the initiative against his enemies. He learns from his spies that Prince Mustafa is in love with the admiral's daughter. Obviously, His Majesty would never approve of this marriage. Once the admiral becomes Prince Mustafa's father-in-law, Prince Mustafa's power will become too great to control. Rustem is determined to kill two birds with one stone. Rustem sends dozens of secret guards to kidnap the admiral's daughter. Heiser's mediocre martial arts skills are no match for them. Rustem uses this to blackmail the admiral into resigning, otherwise he will kill his daughter. The admiral is so angry that he has a heart attack and falls ill. On the other hand, the news of Hyzer's disappearance reaches Prince Mustafa's ears. He immediately leaves his province with several of his men to search for her. His men advise him not to be impulsive. It could be a trap, but he loves Hyzer so much that he doesn't care. Through spy intelligence, he finds the kidnappers and successfully rescues Hyzer. Then the two of them go together to visit the sick admiral. Unfortunately, this exactly falls into Hürrem's trap. She tells His Majesty that the admiral is very ill. Suleiman is worried and immediately goes to visit. The sight of his eldest son with the naval gang terrifies Suleiman. In his nightmares, Prince Mustafa joining forces with the fleet to attack his palace. Prince Mustafa assures that he has no collusion with the navy and just came to rescue the admiral's daughter. However, the prince leaving the province without permission is a big mistake. Although Suleiman doesn't punish Mustafa, he no longer trusts him. He's worried that Mustafa might collude with other forces such as the Janissaries. So he asks his door guard to investigate what exactly happened between Rustem and the Janissary commander. What if that was Prince Mustafa framing Rustem? The next day, the door guard compiles a report. It's full of evidence of the Janissary commander's corruption. Suleiman realizes that he might have wronged Rustem. Little did Suleiman know that Hurrem was actually manipulating the whole situation. His door guard had a lot of dealings with Hurrem to drive a wedge between the Janissaries and Prince Mustafa. His Majesty specifically sends Prince Mustafa to arrest and execute the Janissary commander. However, the Janissaries don't resist at all. Prince Mustafa is very sad to see his loyal servant about to be executed, but he can't disobey his father's will. At the last moment before the execution, the Janissary commander even shouts that he and his comrades will be loyal to Prince Mustafa to the end. Everyone is shocked. It only heightens His Majesty's suspicions about Prince Mustafa. Hurrem stands upstairs, watching the beheading with excitement. After getting rid of one of Prince Mustafa's most indispensable supporters, she intends to target his equally crucial associate, the admiral. Hurrem sends the door guard to give the admiral a jar of honey, lying to him that it's from His Majesty. In fact, it contains slow-acting poison, so the food taster can't detect anything unusual. Gradually, the admiral becomes weaker and weaker. Within a dozen days, he passes away. When Suleiman hears this sad news, he can barely stand as the people he trusts leave one by one. This emperor of the world becomes increasingly haggard and helpless. The powerless concubine's water suddenly breaks late at night. Fatma hurriedly takes her to her own room and assigns dozens of maids to assist with the delivery. Fatma keeps a close eye on them at all times, fearing that Hurrem might send someone to harm the baby. Meanwhile, Hurrem is pacing back and forth outside the door, consumed by anxiety. Once Valeria gives birth to a boy, Hurrem's son will have another rival for the throne. Fortunately, it turns out to be a false alarm. Valeria gives birth to a daughter for His Majesty, which poses no threat to Hurrem. Furious by Hurrem's complacency, Fatma decides to use her son to get back at her. Fatma notices that her niece, Huricihan, has fallen in love with Bayezid, Hurrem's third son, so she suggests a seduction trick for Huricihan. She violently smashes Huricihan's father's violin and asks her to find a man to buy a better one. Huricihan takes the broken violin and expresses her sadness to Prince Bayezid. The warm-hearted Bayezid takes Huricihan to the market without hesitation and buys her a good violin. Unexpectedly, their unaccompanied outing is seen by Aga, Hurrem's servant. To avoid further trouble, Bayezid runs away with Huricihan in tow. They don't stop until they reach a stone bridge. Huricihan can't suppress her love for this charming prince any longer. Her kiss ignites a fire within Bayezid, making his heart skip a beat. But Bayezid's romance runs headlong into his mother's furious opposition. You see, Huricihan is Bayezid's cousin. His Majesty will not only forbid a close relative marriage but also be deeply disappointed in Bayezid. But Bayezid doesn't listen to his mother. He believes that both his father and mother are partial to his elder brother Selim and don't love him at all. After returning to his own province, he can't get over that kiss and writes love letters to Huricihan every day. A few months later, he can't bear the pangs of lovesickness and secretly enters the capital to see Huricihan. Fatma learns of this from her niece and immediately reports it to His Majesty. Suleiman severely criticizes Bayezid for being irresponsible and failing the people. In a fit of anger, he exiles Bayezid to the furthest province of the empire as a governor, forbidding him to ever see Huricihan again. Huricihan feels extremely guilty. If it weren't for her, Bayezid wouldn't have gotten into so much trouble. In the evening, Huricihan gives His Majesty her dead father Ibrahim's notebooks, advising him to stop breaking the hearts of loyalists. After reading it, Suleiman is moved and his heart softens. So when Bayezid apologizes to him, he chooses to forgive. Suleiman says that if Bayezid wasn't so hot-tempered, he'd be the son most like him. He admits that he didn't give Bayezid enough care and is responsible for his mistakes. Bayezid is deeply touched. However, this can't bridge the gap that already exists between him and his brother Selim. Ever since Prince Selim took over the governorship of Manisa, he has indulged in drinking and women. The people are full of complaints about him. Once, when he was incognito and inspecting the market, a merchant said that Prince Selim was a lecherous drunkard. He's not even half as capable as Prince Mustafa and Prince Bayezid. Selim is hit right on the sore spot. Regardless of his noble status, he slaps the merchant. The merchant tries to get revenge, but he is stabbed to death by Selim's guards. However, Prince Selim shows no remorse at all. He gives the merchant's wife hush money to cover up the accident. When Prince Bayezid sniffs it out, he criticizes Selim for his incompetent rule and his indulgence. Selim is so angry that he wants to tear Bayezid apart. Thankfully, Prince Mustafa stops him. To ease the hostility between the brothers, Princess Mirimah throws a dinner party. However, Selim and Bayezid get into a fight again. When criticized by his brothers, Selim not only doesn't think he has done anything wrong but instead believes that they are jealous of him. He goes to his father, deliberately putting on a pitiful look, and requests to resign. "My brothers can't accept your decision. They threaten and insult me at every turn. I don't want to be at odds with my brothers, so send me to the farthest province and let them govern Manisa." Suleiman is furious. He gives the other princes a good scolding, saying that as long as he is alive, the governor of Manisa will always be Selim. Insulting Selim is the same as insulting him. Prince Bayezid and Prince Sehangar are both dissatisfied with this. Although Selim is their full brother, they are unwilling to submit to such an incompetent man. In contrast, Prince Mustafa, though not born of the same mother, is outstanding in ability and kind-hearted. These three brothers are willing to support each other and promise never to harm one another. A street vendor blocks the eunuch's way with a cloth, complimenting him on his elegance, like a high-ranking official. This flatters Aga, who is used to being a servant. The second time they meet, the street vendor confesses her love to him and invites him to have dinner at her home. It is the first time in Aga's life that he meets someone who treats him with such warmth and respect. He gives his heart to her. Little does he know that she is a spy. Her approach to him is just to extract information about Hurrem. Under the influence of being drunk and coaxed by her, Aga accidentally reveals a secret. Hurrem built a secret room in the palace, so that she could eavesdrop on parliamentary debates and the country's political decisions, clearing the way for her son's succession. The street vendor tells Fatma's henchman about it. After several explorations in the palace, Fatma finally finds the entrance of the secret room. Hurrem's action has violated the taboo of women's non-involvement in politics. It is enough to be sentenced to death. By the time Hurrem enters the secret room again, Fatma leads Suleiman to the exit and catches Hurrem red-handed. Hurrem argues that she did this to protect His Majesty and her children. There are too many enemies lurking in the palace. She has to take precautions in advance. Suleiman is disappointed in her. After years of losing friends and family, he has regarded Hurrem as the only person he can trust in the world. Unexpectedly, Hurrem has done such an improper thing. Suleiman's trust in her shatters completely. From then on, he gradually distances himself from Hurrem. The once intimate relationship has now become an unbridgeable chasm. Hurrem orders her servants to investigate who leaked the secret. Aga suddenly remembers that he once told the street vendor about it. Hurrem gives him a bottle of poison and makes him pay for his mistake. Caught between love and loyalty, Aga is torn. In the end, he follows Hurrem's instructions and puts poison in his lover's meal, asking her who she told. The street vendor says she doesn't know the man's name, only that he's a supporter of Prince Mustafa. There is a group of powerful people joining forces to help Prince Mustafa ascend the throne, but Prince Mustafa knows nothing about these people. Watching his lover lose her breath in his arms, Aga's heart is completely broken. Hurrem feels sorry for him. She says she has been too focused on dealing with the enemy and her sons and has ignored Aga's feelings and thoughts. Aga tells the story of how he was abducted when he was a child. His penis was forcibly cut off, and he was sold into the palace as a slave. Hurrem can't bear to keep him trapped and suffering. She releases Aga and gives him his freedom, allowing Aga to have the opportunity to choose his own destiny. On the other hand, Hurrem continues her power struggle with Prince Mustafa. The supporters of Prince Mustafa lurk in the shadows like ghosts. She has no way to get at them. So she joined forces with Rustem to launch a series of attacks on Prince Mustafa himself. They plan to drive an irreparable wedge between Suleiman and Mustafa. Rustem fabricates complaints from merchants, slandering Prince Mustafa for being nepotistic during his tenure in the Amaja province. But Suleiman doesn't believe this at all. He believes that Prince Mustafa would never treat the people badly. So he asks Rustem to write to the nobles around Amaja, asking for their opinions on Prince Mustafa. The nobles quickly reply. They praise Prince Mustafa as extremely outstanding and the future sultan of theirs. Subsequently, Rustem presents all these letters to His Majesty. All this praise for Mustafa is worrying Suleiman. It seems that they are more willing to serve Mustafa than him, the current sultan. Suleiman recalls that when he was a prince, his father sent him a poison robe. Luckily, her mother prevented him from wearing it and saved him from dying in the battle for the throne. A few days later, Suleiman orders his tailors to make a robe. Then he sends guards to deliver the robe to Mustafa. Along with it, he attaches a letter, warning Mustafa to draw a clear line from those nobles. Mustafa's wife thinks His Majesty has good intentions and persuades him to try on the splendid robe. Just as he is about to put it on, his mother bursts in, shouting for him to take it off. Everyone is confused. Mahadevran orders the guard who delivered the robe to put it on. Within 2 seconds, the guard dies from breathing difficulties. Mahadevran reveals that this is exactly the same way his grandfather tried to kill his father decades ago. Mustafa is indignant and grieved. He never intended to take his father's throne. And yet, his father had tried to kill him. To survive, he has to fight with all his might. Prince Mustafa leads thousands of warriors to march on the capital. As soon as Suleiman's janissaries see him, they immediately kneel down and submit, expressing their support for Mustafa. With the shouts of "Long live Prince Mustafa," Mustafa reaches the palace walls without firing a single shot. Suleiman feels a huge sense of crisis. His troops are on an expedition abroad and can't return in a short time. He immediately sends Rustem out to persuade all the soldiers to lay down their weapons. However, no one obeys the order, except Mustafa. He says that he brought so many people to the capital not to kill his father but to ask his father for an explanation. Suleiman has no choice but to agree to his audience. Prince Mustafa, accompanied by 2 guards and carrying the poison robe, walks into the heavily guarded palace. At the sight of Mustafa, Suleiman is overwhelmed with fear and anger. After all, his father ascended the throne by killing his grandfather. To his surprise, Prince Mustafa says, "If you want to kill me, look me in the eye and do it. Don't use the humiliating method of poisoning. I will never rebel. I was just forced to take up arms for self-defense. If I have to die, I want to die as a warrior." Suleiman is greatly puzzled. He didn't poison Mustafa's robe at all. Suleiman orders Rustem to find out the person who poisoned the robe and give Mustafa justice. Prince Mustafa's unwavering loyalty, even in the face of death, wins him the trust of His Majesty. Suleiman confesses that he too was wrongly accused of rebellion by his father and almost poisoned by his robes. So he understands Prince Mustafa's sadness and anger. He apologizes to Mustafa and promises that he will never kill Mustafa in his lifetime. Deep down, these 2 father and son love each other. But in the vortex of power, with various forces deliberately causing trouble, their relationship is inevitably disrupted and damaged. A 40-year-old aunt turns out to be in love with the same man as her 20-year-old niece. In the end, it is Fatma, a charming widow in her 40s, who wins the man's heart. Princess Mirimah has thus completely breaks with Fatma and is determined to shatter her heart. A few days ago, to strike at Hurrem, Fatma planned to set a trap for her daughter, Princess Mirimah. Fatma found Elkaz, a Persian prince in exile, and asked him to pay court to Princess Mirimah. So Elkaz presents Mirimah with her favorite laurel tree. At the dinner table, Elkaz showers her with compliments and sweet nothings. Princess Mirimah's heart skips a beat. The next day, Mirimah receives a love letter. She assumes it's from Elkaz. After all, Elkaz was the only man she'd had contact with lately, besides her husband. The shy Mirimah intends to write back to Elkaz, asking him why he has fallen in love with her. Suddenly, her husband Rustem bursts in and discovers the love letter. Rustem gets jealous and asks her who sent the letter. Mirimah accuses him of having no right to pry into her privacy. The two have a huge argument over this secret lover. Mirimah has never loved Rustem and had to marry him for political reasons. Despite his kindness to her, she can no longer endure this loveless, dull marriage. The next morning, Mirimah announces that she wants to divorce Rustem. Her mother firmly opposes it, because Hürrem still needs to rely on Rustem's power to put her son on the throne. But Mirimah does not compromise. As a princess of royal blood, I have the right to divorce my husband. Fatma can't wait to bring this news to His Majesty and urge him to approve the divorce. Seeing Hürrem's frustration, Fatma is extremely pleased. Princess Mirimah explains to her father that Rustem is good to her, but she doesn't love him. Suleiman is very understanding of his daughter, but they're about to go on a campaign against Persia. He tells her to get divorced after the campaign to avoid causing other disturbances. Princess Mirimah is overjoyed, unaware that the man of her dreams has hooked up with her aunt. Elkaz is more attracted to Fatma, the lust-filled widow, and has no interest in the well-behaved Princess Mirimah. Fatma is smitten by Elkaz's flirtations with her aunt. On the other hand, Rustem is still in love with Princess Mirimah and does not want to divorce her, so he asks Zal Mahmud to find out who sent the letter to Princess Mirimah. Soon after, Elkaz visits Princess Mirimah again. Rustem recalls that Elkaz had given Mirimah a brooch. His intuition tells him that Elkaz may be the third party in his marriage. While he interrogates Elkaz, Zal Mahmud finds out where the love letter came from. It was none other than Fatma who had written it. Rustem heaves a sigh of relief. He tells Mirimah that it was all a trick by Fatma. Those sweet words weren't written by the man you had in mind. You were just a victim of false love. Mirimah's resentment towards Fatma grows even deeper. In order to find out Fatma's weakness, she sends her maid to secretly follow her. After some time, her maid finally discovers Fatma's affair with Elkaz. After learning when and where they meet, Mirimah takes revenge. She purposely lets the judge break in while they're in the throes of love, and arrests Fatma for adultery. Even though Fatma reveals her noble royal status, the judge doesn't believe her. Just as Fatma is about to be dragged off to the dungeon, Rustem shows up and makes them a deal. As long as Fatma marries Elkaz, he'll hide their affair. That way, his marriage to Mirimah would not be threatened. Fatma will have to move out of the palace when she gets married. It is like killing two birds with one stone. Fatma has no choice but to ask His Majesty for permission to marry Elkaz. Traditionally, such a marriage would have been impossible, because the Ottomans and the Persians are at war. Elkaz pleads with Suleiman to send troops to help him seize the Persian throne from his brother. In this way, the marriage would increase Elkaz's loyalty to the Ottomans. Seeing the political benefits, Suleiman does not refuse, but the wedding would have to wait until Elkaz took the Persian throne. But just as Fatma is looking forward to her wonderful marriage, misfortune strikes. Her fiancé, Elkaz, is captured and executed by his brother, the king of Persia. Fatma's love is shattered and she loses her smile. Meanwhile, Hurrem is busy trying to ruin her third son's romance. She's worried that Huricihan is out for revenge and warns her to stay away from Bayezid. But instead of listening, Huricihan secretly marries Prince Bayezid. While Bayezid is out hunting, Hurrem instructs Bayezid's tutor to drive Huricihan away. However, Huricihan is determined not to leave her beloved. Helplessly, she uses the secret of Prince Mustafa as a bargaining chip to get a chance to stay by Bayezid's side. Bayezid's tutor immediately sends a letter to Suleiman, stating that Prince Mustafa has secretly married Heiser, the daughter of the former admiral, and they have a son. Suleiman is stunned as if by a bolt from the blue. According to the rules, a prince's marriage must be approved by the Sultan. What Mustafa did was to challenge his authority. His trust in Mustafa collapses again. He writes a letter to Mustafa, forbidding him from entering the capital. Mustafa is devastated. Just a few days ago, Suleiman was happily saying that Mustafa would be the regent when he went on campaign. Mustafa immediately summons his men to investigate who leaked the secret of his marriage. When he learns that it's Bayezid, the one he trusts the most, Prince Mustafa's heart is broken. He sends a letter to Bayezid, expressing his disappointment. Confused, Prince Bayezid angrily accuses his tutor of betrayal. Shamed, he confesses that Huricihan is the real informer. Bayezid is furious and harshly condemns Huricihan for being shameless and ungrateful. Previously, to avoid being seen, it was Prince Mustafa who brought Huricihan to his palace so that Bayezid could meet her there. Huricihan's betrayal makes Bayezid ashamed to face his brother. Though sorry, she doesn't regret her choice. As long as she can be with Bayezid, she would rather die than not be with him, let alone betray others. Bayezid finds it hard to forgive her and chooses to ignore Huricihan. As Mustafa loses favor in Suleiman's heart, Prince Selim is appointed regent. During Suleiman's campaign, Prince Selim is authorized to rule the empire. Prince Szigetvár knows that Mustafa has been framed. He has always felt that Selim was incompetent and unworthy of the Sultan's throne. When he meets Selim, he even refuses to give him a hug. Selim feels humiliated and in turn mocks Szigetvár's disability. You've grown up, yet you still hide behind your mother. Szigetvár can't bear it any longer. He goes to his father and begs him to take him with him on his campaign. He also wants to contribute to the empire like other princes. Soon after, His Majesty sets off for the military camp with Prince Bayezid and Prince Szigetvár. Mustafa quickly rushes to apologize to his father. He explains that he hid the marriage because he feared his father would think he was collaborating with the navy. But Suleiman can't forgive him for acting on his own again and again. He warns Mustafa not to disobey his orders anymore. Prince Mustafa has to return to the Amazigh province. Before he enters the palace, his men report a crucial piece of information. 2 Persian spies have infiltrated the military camp and are planning to assassinate Suleiman. Without hesitation, Prince Mustafa gallops towards the military camp. His Majesty is discussing tactics in his tent. 2 spies are ready to assassinate him with sharp knives. At the critical moment, Prince Mustafa barges in with his men and subdues the spies. Suleiman narrowly escapes. However, instead of thanking Mustafa, Suleiman even suspects him. Why didn't your men report such important information directly to me but to you? How could you find out something I didn't know? Suleiman doesn't trust Prince Mustafa and drives him back to the province. Before leaving, Prince Mustafa sadly finds his 2 younger brothers, Szigetvár and Bayezid, to chat. They make an agreement that no matter who becomes the Sultan in the future, they will never harm each other. A few days later, due to back pain, Szigetvár has to return to the palace early. He highly praises Mustafa in front of Hurrem. If it weren't for Mustafa's timely rescue, the Sultan might have died. Hurrem tries to persuade her son not to get too close to Mustafa. If Mustafa ascends the throne, he will surely execute me and your brothers. But Szigetvár doesn't care. If you don't want any conflict, Mom, you should give up the fight for the throne. Bayezid and I will support Mustafa to become the Sultan. Hurrem is furious. She believes that her 2 sons are too naive and have been used and deceived by Mustafa. Now, only Selim is on her side. Selim promises that he will listen to every word of his mother. Obviously, her other 2 sons won't be so obedient. Hurrem has to give up supporting Bayezid and instead fully support Selim to ascend the throne. In her opinion, only in this way can she and her children can be saved. Sultan Suleiman's feet suddenly swell up and become suppurated and ulcerated. He can't even stand. So he has to end the campaign and return to the palace. However, he loses consciousness and falls into a coma. The whole country is in a state of panic. There are rumors that Suleiman is about to go to his grave. Mustafa's supporters plan to wipe out their enemies during this period. When Hurrem finishes paying tribute to her deceased eldest son and walks into a narrow alley, Mustafa's supporters cut the ropes of the scaffolding. Hundreds of stones rain down on Hurrem. A fife shields Hurrem and takes the brunt of the impact. Hurrem narrowly escapes. Unfortunately, a fife's loyal life comes to an end. At the same time, the Sultan has a high fever. The doctors quickly put Suleiman in a bathtub filled with ice to cool him down. In a daze, Suleiman murmurs the name of his eldest son, Mustafa. Everyone is shocked. Hurrem sets aside her grudges and sends a letter to Prince Mustafa, asking him to come to the palace to see the Sultan. Prince Mustafa has long wanted to go, but without his father's order before. He didn't dare to act without permission. Heiser is worried that it's a trap and immediately writes to her acquaintances in the navy, asking them to escort Mustafa. For a while, Mustafa's allies all take action. Thousands of naval fleets arrive in the waters near the palace. The Janissaries riot and demand to see the Sultan. Rustem criticizes Hurrem for calling Prince Mustafa to the capital. Hurrem says that while the struggle for the throne holds significance, the Sultan's will take precedence above all else. She asks Rustem to support Prince Bayezid to ascend the throne in the future, but this goes against Rustem's will. He also thinks that Prince Bayezid is more capable and suitable to be the emperor. To get rid of Prince Selim, Rustem deliberately encourages him to go to the Janissaries to offer condolences. You are the regent. You need to show extraordinary courage to win their respect. Only in this way will they recognize that you are the worthy heir to the empire. Prince Selim's confidence skyrockets, and he proceeds to inspect the Janissary camp. However, his interaction with the Janissaries doesn't go smoothly. In the Janissaries' hearts, only Mustafa is worthy to be the future sultan. The dissolute and arrogant Selim is nothing. Prince Selim is surrounded by the Janissaries and in their wrath. At the critical moment, Prince Mustafa arrives. The Janissaries immediately put down their swords to show their submission. Prince Mustafa severely rebukes the Janissaries for disrespecting the prince. He announces that the Sultan is still alive. If anyone has ulterior motives, he will personally behead him. With just a few words, Prince Mustafa calms a terrible turmoil and rescues Prince Selim. Prince Mustafa's prestige among the people is even higher. On the contrary, Prince Selim is ridiculed. Instead of being grateful to Mustafa, Selim blames all the faults on Mustafa. Without your support, the Praetorians would not have dared to intimidate me and threaten me. Nonetheless, Hurrem says thank you to Mustafa. Mustafa says that he did it not for her. Selim is his brother, and no matter what happens, he won't harm him. Hurrem sighs that she doesn't want to be an enemy of Mustafa either. But such is the cruel twist of fate that the tranquility enjoyed by one party spells doom for the other. Mustafa can only blame the fact that he isn't her son. After a while, Suleiman recovers and wakes up. When he learns that the Janissaries drew their swords against Selim, Suleiman is extremely angry. The Sultan immediately draws his sword and beheads the Janissary leader. Anyone who insults my dynasty will pay with their life. Seeing that his father is safe and sound, Mustafa says goodbye to his brothers and aunt and returns to the Amazigh province. Although he has no intention of rebelling, his huge influence among the Janissaries and the navy makes Suleiman feel afraid. Princess Mirimah travels thousands of miles with her daughter to visit her brother's family. His family receives her with great enthusiasm and shows her the utmost kindness. After dinner, Princess Mirimah brings up her desire to end the feud with Prince Mustafa. Despite being paternal half-siblings, she holds great admiration for him. Prince Mustafa is quite delighted. Little does he know that his sister has not only come here to deceive him, but also will bring him to death. When no one is around, Princess Mirimah searches for her brother's seal. Then, she replaces the real seal with a replica. Meanwhile, her husband and mother forge a rebellion letter in the name of Prince Mustafa. It writes that Mustafa is seeking an alliance with the Persian king to usurp Suleiman's throne. They then seal the letter with Prince Mustafa's seal brought by Princess Mirimah. Now, the fabricated evidence of rebellion appears extremely convincing. Sometime later, the king of Persia sends a messenger with a letter of consent. On the way, Rustem asks his men to attack the messenger and sees the king of Persia's reply. Hürrem then buys Suleiman's most trusted minister and has him deliver the letter to him. Reading that the king of Persia has allied with Mustafa and is plotting to kill the Sultan, Suleiman feels his heart being torn apart. This truly hits Suleiman's sensitive spot. Years ago, his father killed his grandfather and his brothers to ascend the throne. His father told him that to reach great heights, one has to be merciless. Young lions killing old lions is how power works. Although Suleiman doesn't approve of his father's cruel methods, Mustafa's actions make him feel threatened. If Mustafa is not punished, both his throne and his life might be at stake. Driven by fear and anger, Suleiman sends a letter to his eldest son, summoning Mustafa to come to the military camp to meet him. Mustafa's mother, wife, and subordinates all oppose his going to the camp. This false accusation is too serious. His Majesty is very likely not to show mercy to Mustafa. But Mustafa doesn't listen to their advice. Only by going to the camp can he explain the misunderstanding to his father and find out the person who framed him. If he disobeys the order, wouldn't it prove that he's guilty and disloyal? At least His Majesty once swore an oath that he would never kill him. Since Mustafa insists on going to show his loyalty, everyone won't stop him. Mahadevran gives him a small pouch. It's a lucky charm she painstakingly obtained from a very powerful witch. Intellectually, Prince Mustafa trusts his father, yet he still can't control his fear and anxiety. Especially when, upon his arrival at the military camp, Suleiman avoids meeting him. He has Mustafa camped several kilometers away from him and tells him to rest for the night first. Prince Szigetvár senses something bad is happening and rushes to the camp. He kneels down and begs his father to give Mustafa a chance to explain. Szigetvár assures him that Mustafa is innocent and has no intention of rebelling. Seeing his youngest son in tears, Suleiman consoles him, saying that he won't harm Mustafa. But in fact, Suleiman sends his men to deliver food to the executioners hiding in the carriage. Prince Szigetvár knows nothing about this. He runs happily to Mustafa's tent, telling him that His Majesty doesn't believe the accusations and just wants to talk to Mustafa. His Majesty promised him that he won't kill Mustafa. Mustafa finally breathes a sigh of relief. Early the next morning, Suleiman has the executioners quietly hide in his tent. At the same time, Prince Mustafa puts on a pure white clothes and bids farewell to his subordinates one by one. On his way to Suleiman's tent, the Praetorians kneel in front of Mustafa, pleading with him not to go any further. They're afraid that something bad will happen to Mustafa. But Mustafa has great trust in his father. No matter who tries to persuade him, he refuses to take a step back. Prince Mustafa voluntarily disarms himself and enters Suleiman's tent defenselessly. Suleiman's loyal soldiers quickly block the entrance to prevent anyone from disturbing them. Upon seeing Mustafa, Suleiman says through gritted teeth, "You betrayed me." Before Mustafa can open his mouth to explain, the executioners leap out from behind the curtain. Suleiman silently watches throughout the process as his son struggles and loses his breath. In the end, Prince Mustafa's life comes to an end at the age of 38. For now, influenced by slander, Suleiman doesn't know that his son is innocent. He has no regrets about executing a traitor, but as a father, his heart is filled with grief. The Praetorians lift Prince Mustafa's body with reverence and observe a moment of silence in his honor. Prince Szigetvár experiences a gut-wrenching feeling that the sky is plummeting, leaving him in utter despair. His father clearly promised him that he wouldn't kill his brother. He rushes, hunched over, to the front of Suleiman's tent and bitterly denounces him for deceiving him and killing the innocent. But Suleiman sits there with dignity and doesn't give any response. Grief and guilt completely overwhelm Szigetvár. The Praetorian guards fiercely capture a traitor, screaming for vengeance for Prince Mustafa. A day earlier, Mustafa's subordinates and his wife had a bad feeling. To prevent a tragedy from happening, they planned to rebel. So they secretly contacted the head of the Praetorian Guard and asked him to imprison His Majesty. However, the second-in-command kills him and falsely spreads an edict, ordering the Praetorians to stay put. After finding out the truth, the Praetorians are determined to kill the traitor. The traitor confesses that he was instructed by Rustem. The Praetorians immediately rush to the front of Rustem's tent, shouting that he must pay the price. To quell their anger, Suleiman dismisses Rustem from his position as Grand Vizier and drives him out of the camp. Rustem dodges and hides, then runs back to the palace to inform Hurrem of the situation. Upon hearing the news of Mustafa's death, Princess Mirimah is filled with regret. If she hadn't stolen Mustafa's seal, this bloodshed wouldn't have occurred. She only wanted to help Bayezid get to the throne. Never did she intend to kill Mustafa. The news of Mustafa's death deeply pierces the hearts of the people of the Ottoman Empire. They blame everything on Rustem and Hurrem. There are cries for Rustem and Hurrem to be killed and Mustafa's son to be crowned. The followers of Prince Mustafa rise up in arms and besiege Rustem's palace, trying to kill him. Rustem hurriedly leads his wife and daughter and ducks into the tunnel to make their escape, but another group of followers catches up and surrounds them. Just as the swords are about to fall on them, Prince Bayezid arrives and repels the others. Princess Mirimah and Rustem manage to return to the palace with their lives intact. Although the death of his brother makes Bayezid deeply grieved, he can't bear to see his sister suffer, so he has to save Rustem's life. The people are extremely dissatisfied with this outcome and swear to seek justice for Prince Mustafa. They gather outside the palace, demanding that the royal family hand over Rustem. In this chaotic and dangerous situation, Prince Bayezid steps forward again. First, he expresses that he understands everyone's pain. Then he states that all of this is His Majesty's decision. No one can oppose the will of a great ruler. Despite his dismissal, Rustem is still the son-in-law of the dynasty, so I won't hand over him. Prince Mustafa is always merciful and surely does not want to see anyone hurt because of him. The anger of the people gradually subsides. They disperse one by one. Everyone is impressed by Prince Bayezid's charisma, even the subordinates of Prince Mustafa. However, Bayezid vents all his negative emotions on his mother. He blames Hurrem for granting Rustem power and aiding him in causing Mustafa's death. In fact, Mustafa's death doesn't bring Hurrem the happiness she expected. She knows it will bring more troubles. Because Mustafa's followers will never give up attacking her and her children, she has to pull herself together and keep fighting. Hurrem writes to Suleiman, who is far away in the military camp, telling him that some people are creating chaos and trying to support Mustafa's son to ascend the throne. She pleads with him to take measures and nip the traitor's evil intentions in the bud. On the other side, Mustafa's mother, wife and children are devastated by the news of his execution. Mahidevran wishes she could drink poison and follow her son to leave this world. But her little grandson still needs protection. She can't let this innocent boy become a political victim either. Mahidevran buckles down and leads her family to Bursa to see Mustafa for the last time. Touching her son's cold body, her tears stream down like a waterfall. In her heart, she curses Suleiman as a tyrant and a foolish ruler. She knows that Hurrem must have played a part in this behind the scenes. Therefore, she scolds Bayezid, saying that being Hurrem's son is a sin. Bayezid feels so guilty that he can only silently shovel the soil to bury his brother. He finally realizes why His Majesty made him stay in the palace as regent. Because if he had been in the camp, he would have definitely risked his life to protect Mustafa and stop everyone from killing. Now, Mustafa's family members are like walking dead, having lost their souls. But His Majesty is still uneasy and sees Mustafa's bloodline as a great threat. He sends people to forcibly take away Mustafa's only son. Mahidevran can no longer hold back her anger. She breaks into the palace, intending to put an end to the evildoer who destroyed her son and grandson. However, her daughter-in-law collapses even before she does. Heiser comes up behind Hurrem with a dagger. The deaths of her husband and son have taken away all her happiness. In the terrified eyes of everyone, she chooses to curse Hurrem with her own death. The successive deaths of family members deal a huge blow to Mahidevran. She is on the verge of collapse and her mental state becomes abnormal. She fiercely chokes Hurrem's neck, demanding that she go to hell. Fortunately, the guards arrive in time and restrain her. Mahidevran lays a curse on Hurrem, wishing that she meets a miserable and agonizing end. Your beloved Suleiman is a murderer. Since he killed my son, he won't show mercy to your children either. Your sons will definitely fight among themselves and die a miserable death. After losing her son, Mahidevran is no match for Hurrem at all. She entrusts Fatma to deal with Hurrem and avenge Mustafa. At present, the only thing left of Mustafa is a daughter. To protect her, Mahidevran has to take her away from the palace. But her curses keep haunting Hurrem all the time. In the dead of night, Hurrem's eyes are gushing with tears. There is her apology to Mustafa, but also a trace of relief. She had finally gotten rid of a powerful enemy. Nevertheless, this is but the starting point of her boundless misery. She doesn't know that her youngest son is already critically ill. Prince Szigetvár hates his father's deception and ruthlessness. He has completely seen through the darkness of court intrigues and feels disgusted with being in such an environment.
The hunchback prince writhes in excruciating pain and lets out groans. To ease his suffering, His Majesty gives the doctor permission to feed him opium syrup. Sweet illusions soon wash over Prince Szigetvár. There is no power struggle or death, but only the company of a beautiful angel. Prince Szigetvár becomes so addicted to the syrup, consuming several bottles of it every day. After indulging in the joyous spiritual world for some time, Prince Szigetvár's physical condition surprisingly improves. He approaches his father full of vigor and invites him to go hunting. However, Sultan Suleiman's relief is short-lived. He soon notices that something is amiss with his son. The death of Prince Mustafa has dealt a severe blow to Szigetvár both mentally and physically. He starts babbling incoherently, and even the syrup can no longer alleviate his pain. Suleiman realizes that his youngest son may not have much time left, so he hurriedly sends a letter to Hurrem, informing her that their son is critically ill. Hurrem is terrified out of her wits. She hastily boards a carriage and rushes to the military camp to see her son. Unfortunately, Hurrem is too late. On the way, the carriage carrying Szigetvár's coffin blocks her path. Prince Szigetvár died at the age of 22. 52 days after Mustafa's death, Szigetvár goes to heaven to look for his beloved brother. Grief and guilt intertwine, forming an impenetrable web that traps her tightly. If only she hadn't slandered Mustafa, maybe her children would be safe. Now, there are only two of her sons, left as potential heirs to the Ottoman Empire. They are on the verge of fighting tooth and nail for the throne. Cecilia was once a noble lady from Venice. One day, the Turks invaded her family's estate and captured her. She and her mate were sold into slavery in the harem of Sultan Suleiman. Cecilia couldn't bear to live such a lowly life. At night, she broke the mirror in an attempt to end her miserable existence. Unexpectedly, Prince Selim noticed the commotion and called a doctor to save her life. Soon after, her maid Valeria climbed into His Majesty's bed and became pregnant. The concubines began to shower Valeria with favors. Valeria became increasingly arrogant and humiliated Cecilia. Cecilia couldn't take it anymore. She knew that Prince Selim was the Sultan's favorite son and was likely to ascend to the throne. To gain a higher status, she made a bold move. She rushed madly into Hurrem's chambers and knelt before her, begging Hurrem to send her to Prince Selim's harem. She swore she would do whatever Hurrem asked her to do. Hurrem saw a reflection of herself decades ago in Cecilia. It deeply touched her, so she agreed to Cecilia's request and gave her a new name, Nurbanu. It means shining woman in Turkish. However, this act of Hurrem's will later cost her son's life. In order to capture Prince Selim's heart, Nurbanu served him fine wine and put on a show every night. Selim soon fell head over heels for her and doted on her. After a few years, Nurbanu gave birth to 3 daughters and a son, but she was still plagued by anxiety. She feared that if Prince Bayezid came to the throne, he would execute her and her children, so she's determined to defeat Bayezid and help Selim become the Sultan. Nurbanu asked Ghaznfar, Prince Selim's personal guard, for help in gathering information about Prince Bayezid. This guard secretly meets his mistress in the garden. He gives her a diamond ring as a token of his love. Nurbanu is shocked and scolds him for crossing the line. Unexpectedly, their hand-in-hand scene is witnessed by Huricihan, Prince Bayezid's wife. Nurbanu quickly catches up with her and explains that it was a misunderstanding. She begs Huricihan not to tell on her, as she has several children to take care of. However, these words hurt Huricihan deeply. After being married for many years, Huricihan has tried every possible means to get pregnant but has failed. This has already caused her great pain. Now, Nurbanu's words seem like a deliberate provocation. She is determined to bring Nurbanu down. To stop Huricihan from informing, Nurbanu resorts to an extreme measure. She hits Huricihan on the head with a metal candlestick. But when Huricihan loses consciousness, Nurbanu panics. She quickly flees the crime scene and returns to the festival, pretending that nothing has happened. However, that blow doesn't kill Huricihan immediately. She stumbles into the festival and tries to report it to the crowd. But as soon as she sees Nurbanu, her blood pressure surges with anger, and she faints. Blood is streaming down the back of her head. There are bruises on her arms from being grabbed. Prince Bayezid immediately realizes that this is a case of intentional harm. He goes straight to the crime scene to look for clues about the murderer. An earring behind the curtain catches his eye. It is the very earring that Nurbanu dropped during her scuffle with Huricihan. Suleiman is saddened by his niece's serious injuries. He orders a search of the harem to find the owner of the earring. Nurbanu runs to Prince Selim's room and hides the other earring there, believing that the servants won't dare to search the prince's chambers. However, another indelible piece of evidence betrays her. During their intimacy, Prince Selim notices the marks of the fight on her body. When he learns that she attacked Huricihan, Prince Selim is filled with horror. Afraid of being implicated, it drives Nurbanu out. However, nothing can escape from notice. She finds the other earring of Nurbanu in her son's room. Unable to bear such a vicious woman at her son's side, she orders Nurbanu to be thrown into a dungeon to await execution. Nurbanu kneels and begs Hurrem to spare her life, but to no avail. In desperation, she turns to threaten Hurrem. Half a year ago, the Sultan visited Prince Selim's palace to see his newly born grandson. Along with him was his concubine Valeria. Hurrem was consumed by jealousy and wrote to Nurbanu, instructing her to secretly get rid of Valeria. So, Nurbanu deliberately lured Valeria to the damaged railing. When Valeria wasn't looking, she ripped off her necklace and threw it downstairs. Valeria leaned out to pick it up and fell down the building, losing her breath. Suleiman thought it was just an accident and didn't pursue it. After a few seconds of sadness, Suleiman composed himself. Nurbanu says that she has kept the evidence of Hurrem's letters to her. If Hurrem exposes her, she will shift all the blame onto Hurrem and even falsely accuse Hurrem of ordering her to kill Hurrichan. Hurrem is caught in a bind and has no choice but to let her go. But Hurrem still needs to give everyone an explanation. After all, Hurrichan was attacked in her jurisdiction. In the end, she finds another of Bayezid's concubines as a scapegoat, accusing her of harming Hurrichan. To prevent the concubine from retracting her confession, Hurrem sends guards to strangle her and makes it look like a death out of guilt. When Bayezid hears the news, he is heartbroken. His children are devastated by the loss of their mother. What's even more devastating for him is that his beloved Hurrichan doesn't survive her injuries. Poor Prince Bayezid loses to family members in just one day. Under Hurrem's shelter, Nurbanu narrowly escapes death, but Hurrem does not want this viper to stay with her son. So she dispatches her trusted maid, Diana, to Selim's palace. On the surface, Diana is there to serve Selim and Nurbanu, but in reality, she has been instructed by Hurrem to find an opportunity to eliminate Nurbanu. To undermine Nurbanu's influence, Diana intends to send a concubine to Prince Selim's bed. However, Nurbanu catches her in the act. She warns Diana not to overstep her bounds and disrupt the order of her harem. I am the only one in charge here. As the seduction plan fails, Diana has to look for another chance to assassinate Nurbanu. On the other hand, Fatma is trying to defeat Hürrem. Since Hürrem supports Bayezid as the heir to the throne, Fatma decides to do the exact opposite. So, Fatma persuades her husband, Ahmet, to side with Prince Selim. Only by eliminating Prince Bayezid can she truly hurt Hürrem. Meanwhile, a large-scale rebellion breaks out among the people. Many still strive to prove Prince Mustafa's innocence. There are even those who pretend to be Prince Mustafa and deceive the masses into starting a rebellion. His Majesty is enraged and orders Prince Bayezid to suppress the rebellion. Ahmet approaches Prince Selim and suggests that he take advantage of this opportunity to bring down Prince Bayezid. Ahmet then colludes with the chief treasurer to embezzle public funds and send boxes of gold to the fake Mustafa, fueling the power of the rebels. At this point, on his way to quell the rebellion, Prince Bayezid gains a powerful warrior. Turgul Bey was once the most trusted subordinate of Prince Mustafa. Months ago, Prince Mustafa had a premonition that he might die before he entered His Majesty's tent. So he entrusted Turgul Bey with the task of supporting Bayezid's ascension to the throne if he died. With the help of Turgul Bey, Prince Bayezid locates the rebels. Not wanting to harm the innocent, he decides to negotiate a peace. He urges them to lay down their weapons and intends to only behead the fake Prince Mustafa. Ahmet seizes the opportunity to slander Prince Bayezid for treason in front of His Majesty. Prince Bayezid gave gold to the rebels and spared the supporters of Prince Mustafa. Suleiman is furious and orders others to directly behead the rebels. His Majesty then sends a letter to Prince Bayezid, summoning him to the capital. But Bayezid refuses to go, fearing that his father might want to kill him, just like what happened to Prince Mustafa. This makes Suleiman even more enraged. Hürrem quickly asks Rustem to bring Bayezid to the royal palace in the capital. Bayezid dares to meet his father only after receiving his mother's promise of protection. Upon seeing his son, Suleiman says nothing but signals his son to have a glass of wine. The memory of his father's execution of his elder brother still haunts Bayezid's mind. Fearing that his father had poisoned the wine, he hesitates to drink it. This upsets Suleiman. Suleiman then drinks the glass of wine right in front of Bayezid. Bayezid's behavior completely breaks Suleiman's heart. Next, he calls Prince Selim over. In front of Bayezid, he announces that Selim will be his heir. Selim fails to keep the elated smile from curving his lips. Bayezid is so angry that he wishes he could strike him. The hatred between the two brothers grew deeper and deeper. Later, Suleiman finds out that it is Mahidevran who is truly behind funding the rebellion. So, Suleiman cuts off Mahidevran's allowance and confiscates all her property, returning it to the state treasury. This means that Mahidevran loses everything and can only rely on her granddaughter. But Suleiman isn't satisfied with punishing the betrayer like this. He orders that Mahidevran's granddaughter be married off to a faraway place. From then on, Mahidevran will be left all alone. Meanwhile, Hürrem finds out that Ahmet is behind the fight between his two sons. Prince Bayezid captures the chief treasurer, who helped Ahmet embezzle public funds. Rustem then reports all of Ahmet's crimes to Suleiman, clearing Prince Bayezid of all false accusations. Suleiman is furious and sentences Ahmet to death on the spot. Rustem regains Suleiman's trust because of this. So Suleiman gives the seal of the Grand Vizier back to Rustem. The masterpiece that Fatma planned turns out to be a complete disaster. Not only does she fail to achieve her goal, but she also loses her husband and becomes a widow once again. The ambitious madam is taking a bath alone, completely unaware that the murderer has locked the door and sneaked in. While Nurbanu is defenseless, the concubine presses her head into the water. But Nurbanu's lungs are so strong that she drowns for several minutes without suffocating. The splashing sound alerts the passing servant. Ghaznfar smashes the lock and rushes in, pushing the concubine away and saving Nurbanu. The severe blow to the head kills the concubine instantly. However, Ghaznfar's intrusion into the ladies' bath violates the rules. Prince Selim loathes this deeply and orders Ghaznfar to be expelled. Nurbanu is extremely reluctant to part with him. Ghaznfar is her most trusted servant. Without his protection, it would be almost impossible for her to survive. As there are many spies of the enemy lurking in the palace, she knows that Diana instigated this assassination attempt, but she has no evidence. And Prince Selim doesn't want to offend his mother, so he won't banish Diana. It just so happens that Ghaznfar is deeply in love with Nurbanu. He'd rather die than leave her. In order to keep Ghaznfar with her rightfully, Nurbanu comes up with a desperate plan. That is to make Ghaznfar become a eunuch. To persuade him, she keeps caressing Ghaznfar's hand, showing that she values him highly. Ghaznfar is mesmerized. He willingly lies on the operating table. After sacrificing his manhood, he promises to do everything to protect Nurbanu. Nurbanu is quite pleased. Next, she starts to plot to bring down Prince Bayezid, Selim's younger brother. She threatens Divin to go to Prince Bayezid's palace as a spy, capture his heart, otherwise she will kill Divin's younger sister. With a bewitching smile, the pretty spy instantly captivates the widower. Prince Bayezid falls into her arms without the slightest doubt. After he falls asleep, Divin secretly checks his letters and learns that he is short of funds recently and is asking his sister for a loan. Divin immediately writes a letter informing Nurbanu of it. Nurbanu urges Selim to rob the gold that his sister lent to Bayezid. Without this money, Prince Bayezid won't be able to compete for the throne. So Selim dispatches his guards to carry out the task. However, Bayezid and his henchmen quickly capture these robbers. Hearing that his brother had given them the order, Bayezid is extremely furious. He cuts off the head of the guard who robbed the gold and sends it to Selim together with a letter of severance. He scolds Selim severely and declares that he will never regard Selim as his brother from then on. Selim is very upset and blames everything on Nurbanu. If it weren't for Nurbanu sending the spy to Bayezid's palace and provoking him to seize the gold, the two brothers wouldn't have turned against each other. Nurbanu can see that Selim can't bear to be too harsh on Bayezid, so she decides to provoke him. Nurbanu puts poison in the wine of the father of her children. When Selim is about to drink it, she immediately stops him, saying that the maid serving the wine looks suspicious and could be a spy for Bayezid. She forces the maid to drink it to verify if it is safe. In a short while, the maid dies. Selim is devastated. He never intended to kill Bayezid. He just took his gold, so he couldn't compete for the throne. Yet Bayezid tried to poison him. He drowns himself in wine to numb his fear. Under Nurbanu's continuous instigation, the drunken Selim orders the spy to take action. But the next day, when he sobers up, he feels regretful. He finds Nurbanu as fast as he can and orders her to stop the messenger and withdraw the killing order. He will never kill his younger brother. Nurbanu agrees on the surface, but in fact, she urges the messenger to send the poison to Divin. When Divin receives the poison, she hesitates because she has already fallen in love with Prince Bayezid. The messenger threatens her to act quickly, otherwise, he will give the same poison to her sister. To keep her sister alive, she has no choice but to sacrifice her lover. The spy pours the poison into the delicious meal. Prince Bayezid is completely unaware of the danger and happily invites her to have dinner together. As the poison invades his internal organs, Prince Bayezid collapses to the floor. Fortunately, his subordinates discover it in time and call the doctor to detoxify him. Prince Bayezid narrowly escapes this despicable attempt on his life. Divin desperately apologizes, explaining that she was instructed by Prince Selim and had to do it to save her sister. Although he feels sympathetic, what Bayezid hates most is a betrayer, so he decides to execute Divin. Unexpectedly, Divin turns out to be pregnant. The naturally kind Bayezid unable to bear to kill her, so he spares Divin's life and just confines her to her room to rest and have the baby. Selim's treacherous poisoning stokes a searing hatred deep within Bayezid's heart. He leads 5,000 soldiers and marches towards Selim's provincial capital to settle the score with Selim. A frightened Selim puts on his armor tremblingly and walks out of the city gate to meet his brother. The two brothers accuse each other of trying to poison the other. Neither of them is willing to back down, and they draw their swords and engage in a fight. At the critical moment, their mother arrives and stops this bloody battle. After investigating, Hurrem learns that this is all a plot by Nurbanu. It is Nurbanu who is destroying the relationship between the two brothers. Hurrem can't stand it any longer and wants to execute Nurbanu. Selim rushes to his mother and pleads for mercy. For the sake of Nurbanu being the mother of his 4 children, he asks his mother to spare her life. In fact, he is timid and has been used to relying on Nurbanu. Without Nurbanu, he will fall into deeper fear and confusion. In order to appease his mother's anger, although death penalty is off the table for Nurbanu, she is bound to face punishment. Selim intends to exile her to the province of their eldest son. After that, Hurrem summons her to sons and educates them to live in peace with each other. She has already lost 2 children and can no longer bear to lose any more. With Hurrem's mediation, the tense standoff between the two brothers is finally alleviated. Selim returns Divin's sister to her, but this can't restore Bayezid's trust in him. Unfortunately, at this crucial moment, when the two brothers are competing so fiercely, Hurrem falls ill. A huge boil suddenly appears on her shoulder, causing her great pain. However, in order not to cause a commotion, she conceals her illness from everyone. she secretly leaves the palace and goes to the residence of a healer to seek help. Unexpectedly, a group of people rush downstairs with clubs in their hands and smash the windows. They shout that Hürrem is an evil witch, and they want to avenge Prince Mustafa. Aga is frightened and pleads with Hürrem to hide, but Hürrem opens the door without hesitation and walks into the crowd. Her powerful presence intimidates everyone, except for a man holding a stone. Just as the stone is about to hit her, the sword thrown by the Sultan pierces the man. The crowd disperses under the expulsion of the royal guards, but Suleiman doesn't dismount to offer his care to Hürrem. On the contrary, he ignores Hürrem. Since the death of his two sons, Suleiman has been immersed in endless grief. Whenever he sees Hürrem, he will think of his dead sons and only feel pain. After investigation, it is found that those rioters were instigated by Fatma and were trying to murder Hürrem. Suleiman is very disappointed in his sister. He knows that Hürrem is not an angel, but she has a quality that none of them have, which is loyalty. Hürrem never wanted to replace him when he sat on the throne. Fatma points out that this is the reason why he has massacred so many people. Suleiman flies into a rage and drives Fatma out of the palace. On the other hand, every secret has a way of eventually coming to light. Hürrem's attending physician tells Bayezid's mentor, Hürrem is suffering from a terminal illness and doesn't have much time left to live. This fills the mentor with panic. He realizes that if Hürrem dies, Prince Bayezid will lose his supporters. On the contrary, Prince Selim's future seems much brighter with the support of His Majesty. So the mentor betrays Bayezid and switches his allegiance to Selim's camp. He swears to Selim that he would do everything in his power to help Selim ascend to the throne. In order to make Selim trust him, the mentor plans to set a trap for Bayezid and lure him into making a mistake. Then, they can use that mistake to report Bayezid to His Majesty. He writes a letter saying that Selim refuses to admit his fault, and actually intends to shift the blame and go to His Majesty to tattle on Bayezid. As they expected, Bayezid flies into a rage when he reads the letter. He knows that Selim is untrustworthy, but he never expected him to be so shameless. It was clearly Selim who tried to poison him first, so how could it have the nerve to speak ill of Bayezid? In a fit of anger, Bayezid sends a box to his elder brother. Inside, it is a green dress and a letter. Bayezid declares war on Selim. If you're a real man, pick up a sword and fight me. If you're too afraid, then put on this dress and hide in your palace like a girl. Selim can't bear such a great humiliation and is determined to make Bayezid pay the price. So he goes to the dueling place with some brave and skilled soldiers. The two brothers are determined to have a life or death battle today, not caring whether their mother will be heartbroken or not. However, Selim's fighting ability is far inferior to Bayezid's. Selim is quickly knocked to the ground and can't resist. Bayezid raises his sword angrily and stabs down, but it doesn't hit Selim. Bayezid really doesn't want to have his brother's blood on his hands. He warns Selim that this is the last time. If Selim gets in his way again, he will definitely not spare him. However, he has no idea that his mercy today will bring him a fatal blow someday in the future. At the same time, their mother's illness is getting worse. Looking at her haggard face due to the intense pain, Aga's heart is torn with grief, and he can no longer stay silent. He weeps as he finds the Sultan and begs him to help save Hurrem. On learning of Hurrem's terminal illness, Suleiman's universe crumbles, leaving him adrift in despair. He drags his aging body and stumbles to Hurrem's presence. With more than 30 years of love story, they've woven their lives so tightly together. The thought of a life without the other throws them into a state of disarray. Thousands of expert doctors surround Hurrem, examining her body from head to toe to identify the illness. They pour medicinal herbs into her bathwater, smearing soil from sacred places on the boils on her shoulder. They even treat her with acupuncture and cupping. However, all the treatments prove ineffective. Hurrem's condition continues to deteriorate. Suleiman is so worried that he can't sleep or eat. Even if there is only a 1% chance of curing his beloved, he won't give up. He takes her thousands of miles to a magical hot spring, but Hurrem is tormented by it all. Since it's impossible to regain her healthy body, she yearns to heal her soul. She goes to her enemy, Mahidevran, and asks for her forgiveness. In the past, the two fought fiercely for their sons, resulting in the death of each other's son. Now that Hurrem's end is near, there's no point in destroying each other. The two former sworn enemies reach a reconciliation and offer each other their blessings. After saying goodbye to Mahidevran, she goes to the tomb of another former enemy, Ibrahim. If it weren't for Ibrahim who brought her into the palace, she might still be a slave, for which she was grateful. But the sight of a minister who had done his country a service without even a tombstone. Hurrem's heart is deeply pained. She's terrified of becoming a nameless footnote in the Ells of Memory. Hurrem donates all her treasures to charitable foundations and servants, building social complexes where people can worship and live. She also writes down all her life experiences in a notebook and asks Aga to keep it carefully so that her descendants can read it. The women across the country are so grateful to Hurrem that they come to the palace to give her their blessings, saying that they will never forget her. Hurrem, knowing that her end is approaching, persuades Suleiman to give up. Instead of exhausting her life in treatment, it would be better to spend it in peace with the one she loved. To fulfill her wish, His Majesty urgently summons the children and grandchildren to return to the capital to have a family meal with her. Her two sons, who have been fighting so hard, also stop their feud temporarily, trying their best to please their mother. However, after this meal, Hurrem can no longer hold on. In the end, with a recitation of love poems from her beloved and surrounded by loving gazes, Hurrem stops breathing, ending her magnificent 56-year life. Hurrem's death has an enormous impact on the Ottoman Empire. Everyone is plunged into grief and despair. Sultan Suleiman even prohibits any more music and celebrations in the harem and bans luxurious items. Only Nurbanu is overly delighted. She takes off the ring that Suleiman gave to Hurrem from Hurrem's finger. Ambitiously, she looks forward to the arrival of her era to rule the country together with Selim. However, this robbery is discovered by Diana, Hurrem's most loyal maid. She angrily denounces Nurbanu and tries to take the ring away. Before she died, Hurrem told Diana that this ring must be buried with her because it symbolizes her undying love for Suleiman. However, Selim ignores his mother's last wish. He accuses Diana of slandering the mother of his children and throws her into the dungeon. A guard enters the dungeon to bring food to the imprisoned maid. While he is defenseless, Diana strangles him with a rope and steals the cell key. She then sneaks into Nurbanu's room, intending to bury her with her mistress. To my surprise, the idle aristocrat proves more combative than the toiling servant. Moments later, Diana is stabbed by Nurbanu and dies filled with regret. On the other hand, the death of Hurrem also turns the fate of the children upside down. It is obvious that there can only be one winner in the battle for the throne. It is clear that only one of them can take the throne. To protect their families from harm, Bayezid and Selim have no choice but to fight. After the funeral, Selim presents His Majesty with a dress and the letter of severance that his younger brother sent him. He complains that Bayezid threatened him and wanted to kill him. Bayezid readily admits that he did raise his sword against his brother, but he did so because Selim stole his gold and then sent a spy to poison him. He disdains such underhanded means and wants to have a one-on-one duel with Selim, but Selim sent archers to launch a surprise attack. He warned Selim many times, but Selim framed him again and again. To convince his father, Bayezid calls in his mentor to testify. He never expected that the person he trusted the most would defect in front of His Majesty. The mentor testifies that Prince Bayezid is lying. Prince Selim is upright and has never harmed his brother. Bayezid gets so angry at his mentor's betrayal that he tries to beat him up. This arouses Suleiman's strong disgust. He scolds Bayezid severely and kicks both his sons out of the room. Bayezid is deeply heartbroken. How could the mentor, who taught him people first value, side with an incompetent, cowardly prince? Thankfully, Bayezid has Rustem on his side, the only minister in the court who supports him. After all, Rustem once swore in front of him and the Hurrem to help Bayezid ascend to the throne. However, he never dreams that Rustem will soon betray him too. Princess Mirimah wakes up with red rashes all over her body, which is terribly. All the doctors in the palace can't diagnose the cause of the illness, let alone cure it. One of the ministers recommends the captured Spanish doctor, Pedro, to His Majesty. But the jealous Rustem can't stand another man looking at his wife, so he has him treat her while covering his eyes. After applying the ointment prepared by Pedro for a period of time, the red rashes on Mirimah's body start to disappear. Rustem immediately forbids Pedro to come again, but the beautiful princess can't get the handsome doctor out of her head. She purposely applies essential oils that can cause her allergies all over her body. When her husband is not at home, the princess, who is covered in rashes, calls Pedro in and asks him to take off his blindfold for treatment. The moment their eyes meet, the spark of love bursts out. Pedro says that Mirimah is suffering from a disease of sadness, and only sunlight and salt water can cure it. So Mirimah often goes for walks by the seaside with him. In front of Pedro, Princess Mirimah is like a shy little girl. Soon, the two of them fall in love with each other. To please the princess, a minister gives Pedro to her as a private doctor. However, Rustem soon gets wind of this information. He goes crazy with jealousy and swings his fist at Pedro. To prevent Pedro from being killed, Princess Mirimah has to release him. With the status of a free man, Pedro's personal safety is protected by the law, but he can no longer stay by Princess Mirimah's side. Before he leaves, Mirimah quietly goes to see him off. Pedro offers to take her away from this cage. Though desperate for love and freedom, Mirimah refuses to leave because she has to protect and help her brother, Bayezid. This love, which never got to bloom, is compelled to wither away. Unfortunately, Rustem catches her having a secret meeting with Pedro. Rustem finally gives up on ever winning wife's love. Over the years, he has tried every means to please Mirimah, but she always ignores him. In that case, let's be a contracted couple. To get back at Mirimah, he gets very close to a Jewish woman who is seeking refuge, but he can't resist her temptation and sleeps with her. The pregnant princess suddenly experiences labor pains and goes into labor, while her husband is lying in the arms of a Jewish woman, making out with her. Even the next day, when His Majesty gives the baby its name, Rustem still hasn't returned home. Soon news of her husband's affair with another woman reaches Mirimah's ears. To teach them a lesson, Mirimah sends people to assassinate the Jewish woman's maid. Sadly, what she does indirectly accelerates her brother's slide into a tragic end. The Jewish woman is extremely terrified. To save herself, she decides to seek refuge with Prince Selim. That night, the Jewess lures Rustem into her home. But in reality, it is Prince Selim who meets Rustem. Selim threatens Rustem to join his camp, otherwise, he will report Rustem's affair to His Majesty. You know, Rustem is His Majesty's son-in-law. If he cheats on his wife, he could be stripped of his position as the Grand Vizier at the least, and at the worst, he could lose his head. Rustem is in a state of extreme dilemma. He swore in front of her that he would support Prince Bayezid to the throne, and to prevent a fight between the two princes. But now that Selim has something on him, he has no choice but to change his stance. When His Majesty is troubled by the hatred between his two sons, Rustem offers the suggestions. So Suleiman follows his advice and appoints Bayezid as the governor of the remote Amasya province and sends Selim to Konya province. He hopes that this will make his two sons reflect on their own mistakes. This completely breaks Bayezid's heart. Ever since he was a child, his father had always favored Selim. Every time, it was Selim who made the first mistake. But as soon as Selim acted pitiful and obedient in front of their father would blame all the mistakes on Bayezid. He only saw Bayezid's impulsiveness, but seemed blind to Selim's cunning. Bayezid doesn't want to go to Amasya, which was once under the jurisdiction of Mustafa. It's like the Sultan is issuing a warning that he will be executed just like Mustafa. But he is not Mustafa, and will never leave his fate in the hands of his father. So he secretly recruits soldiers, buys weapons, and trains his troops. But he has no intention of taking his father's throne, only of defeating Selim. Once Selim is dead, the throne will naturally fall to him. He and his family will have a chance to survive. Meanwhile, Prince Mustafa's loyalists have offered him their support. Rustem is horrified at the news. If Bayezid does rebel, it will be a capital crime, and he will be implicated as well. To survive, he decides to distance himself from Prince Bayezid. To be released from his oath to help Bayezid ascend the throne, he consults the most respected judge. The judge says that he must do charity work so that God will forgive him. Rustem hastily donates all his money to the poor and starts the work of building a mosque, hoping to wash away the sense of guilt in his heart. At the same time, Suleiman also doesn't trust Bayezid and is afraid that he wants to seize his throne. He decides to send an army to deal with Bayezid. In May 1559, Prince Bayezid marches into the Konya plain with 30,000 mercenaries, ready to engage in a battle with his elder brother, Prince Selim. Selim is filled with dread, for the number of his soldiers is only half that of Bayezid's. However, half an hour before the war, there is a dramatic turn of events. Sultan Suleiman sends the commander-in-chief to support Prince Selim with 10,000 janissaries. Under Rustem's warning, the lords who previously supported Bayezid also turned their backs, bringing 20,000 soldiers to stand on Prince Selim's side. Bayezid's heart sinks instantly, realizing that his father has abandoned him. But it doesn't surrender. Since his father doesn't love him, he decides to eliminate Selim to fight for more rights for himself. But just as it charges to within 100 meters of Selim, an arrow pierces his chest. It was fired by Selim's eldest son, Murad. Bayezid is overwhelmed with heartache. He once taught his nephew archery hand in hand, never expecting his nephew would use it to try to kill him. In fact, Murad is also tormented inside, but in the battle for the throne, he has to leave his beloved uncle behind and fight alongside his father. Just as Bayezid is about to be struck, Turgul Bey hurls an axe to stop it. He quickly drags the unconscious Bayezid away from the battlefield. In the end, Bayezid's mercenaries are no match for Selim's regular army. Bayezid's rebellion infuriates Suleiman. He issues a wanted notice for Bayezid, ordering the soldiers to bring Bayezid before him, whether alive or dead. Since his daughters are too young, Bayezid asks them to stay at home and take care of them and his youngest son. The wanted Bayezid takes his 4 sons and sets out to find help. They flee all the way to the border to Prince Mustafa's former supporters. Despite His Majesty's orders that anyone who helped Bayezid would die, this lord still offers his assistance, because he doesn't want another innocent prince to be executed. When Selim comes to force him to hand over Bayezid, he dies rather than yield. He gives all his soldiers and wealth to Bayezid. Cornered, Bayezid has no choice but to flee to the territory of an enemy country with his 4 sons. The Persian king warmly welcomes them and offers them shelter. During dinner, the Persian king says that Suleiman is too old and should step down. He is willing to help Bayezid seize the Ottoman throne. Bayezid firmly refuses his offer of alliance, saying that he only fights against Selim and will never rebel against his father. The Persian king doesn't press further, but intends to use him as a bargaining chip. However, Suleiman does not believe in his loyalty. A son taking refuge with a sworn enemy is simply a great humiliation. Suleiman immediately dispatches an emissary to negotiate with the Persian king. Suleiman will give him 2 million gold coins in a castle if he hands over Bayezid. Otherwise, the Ottoman horsemen will set foot on Persian territory. The king of Persia is tempted by all this and is ready to agree. But the arrival of another emissary half an hour later changes his mind. Prince Selim secretly sneaks into the enemy country and makes a deal with the enemy king. He is willing to offer twice the amount that Suleiman has offered, just to get Bayezid. Not only that, he promises to make friends with Persia when he takes the throne. The Persian king is overjoyed and agrees to the deal with Selim. Selim then returns to his fiefdom to raise a large sum of money. He finds a Jewish woman who had an affair with Rustem and threatens her to lend him 5 million gold coins, otherwise he will kill her. The Jewish woman is terrified and begs him to give her some time to raise the money. On the other hand, Bayezid is unaware of his brother's sinister deal. He tells Turgul Bey to kill the traitor Rustem as a way to avenge Prince Mustafa, so Turgul Bey seeks the help of Princess Mirimah. Without hesitation, she agrees to help him punish the traitor. When Rustem betrayed Bayezid, Mirimah was completely done with him, not to mention his infidelity. Late at night, Princess Mirimah tricks her husband into staying in the room. She then goes out under the pretext of breastfeeding her son, opens the back door and lets Turgul Bey in. Turgul Bey sneaks into the corridor and first goes after Mahmud for revenge, because it was this guy who strangled Prince Mustafa to death. However, his fight with the guards at the door alerts Rustem. The moment he opens the door, he is shot by Rustem, but this injury does not stop him from seeking vengeance. With just a rope, he makes the traitor pay with his life. Rustem finally experiences the despair that Prince Mustafa felt before his death. Unfortunately, Turgul Bey is too severely injured to stand up and is killed by a guard. Shortly after, Princess Mirimah arrives to clean up the bloodshed, disguising Rustem's death as a result of stomach discomfort. She goes to her father to plead for Bayezid, stating that he has no intention of rebelling against his father at all. But her father won't listen and is bent on making Bayezid pay the price. Princess Mirimah writes to Devon, Bayezid's consort, informing her of the Sultan's negotiations with the Persian king. Devon fears for Bayezid's life. She goes to the Persian royal palace in person to find Bayezid and tells him that the Persian king is bargaining with his life. Bayezid immediately sends his henchmen to gather the remaining soldiers, preparing to fight their way out. However, the Persian king has dispersed his army and hanged his loyal followers. Now, Bayezid has no one to rely on except his family and his subordinates. Bayezid weeps bitterly and tells his lover that his father has never trusted him, let alone loved him. In the middle of the night, Bayezid and his family sneak out the back door, trying to escape from the Persian royal palace. However, the Persian king has already seen through his plan and sends soldiers to intercept them. His family is forcefully invited to the Persian king's dining hall. Seeing Bayezid's bravery, the king of Persia wants to use him. He says he will let Bayezid go free if he goes with him to attack Sultan Suleiman. However, Bayezid ignores him. The Persian king loses his temper and hints to the guards to kill Bayezid's subordinates. Bayezid quickly hijacks the Persian king. However, with Persian swords at his family's necks, he gives up his resistance. A prince of the Ottoman Empire is imprisoned in a Persian jail, and together with his sons, even if they stretch their hands through the door crack, they can't touch each other at all. To ease his sons' fear, Bayezid tells them stories day and night through the wall. Fortunately, the Ottoman emissary sends his consort home safely. Then, the envoy presents millions of gold coins to the Persian king, hoping to ransom Bayezid's family back safely. However, the Persian king changes his mind and demands double the amount, and the emissary immediately sends someone to ask Sultan Suleiman for instructions. The next day, the emissary enters the cell to visit Prince Bayezid's family. He makes it clear that Sultan Suleiman doesn't want to kill them. He just wants them to go back and explain themselves. But now that the negotiation is still pending, he begs Prince Bayezid to be patient. Bayezid has no other option but to pin all his hopes on his father. However, Suleiman can't tolerate the Persian king's blatant disrespect and overstepping of boundaries. He refuses to accept the Persian king's additional conditions and is only willing to pay at most 1 million gold coins. If the Persian king does not release his son and grandsons, he will march on Persia himself. As their negotiation reaches an impasse, the Jewish woman raises double the amount of gold coins. Selim quickly hands all of them over to the Persian king. The king of Persia then makes a deal with Selim and hands Bayezid over to him. Selim captures his brother's family and forces his brother to kneel at his feet. If Bayezid is willing to be a slave, he will spare his whole family's lives. Bayezid's sons shake their head. They would rather die than let their father bow down to a despicable man. Seeing that they won't yield, Selim drops his false kindness and reveals his cruel true nature. He says he won't let them go to Suleiman and will execute them on the charge of treason. Bayezid accepts the outcome of the gamble and isn't afraid of death at all. His only concern is for his children. He pleads with his brother tearfully to spare his poor children. However, Selim knows clearly that if he leaves them alive, it's just like planting the seeds of revenge for himself. He hardens his heart and orders the guards to execute Bayezid's children. With cries of grief and curses, Bayezid's life comes to an end at the age of 36. At the same time, Nurbanu breaks into Bayezid's palace to capture his youngest son. To avoid being insulted by the enemy, Tifn and the youngest son drink poison. Gulfum is devastated by the news of Bayezid's death. She believes that Suleiman is a tyrant who has caused all these tragedies. In the dead of night, Gulfum sneaks into Suleiman's bedroom. He is in a trance, suffering from the loss of his son. Gulfum tries to take his life and avenge the wrongly killed princess, but at the last moment, she is killed by Suleiman's guard and stops breathing. 5 years speed by in a heartbeat. Princess Mirimah still can't forgive Selim for killing Bayezid and mocks him everywhere. And Selim, the sole heir to the Ottoman throne, is no longer timid. He warns his sister not to cross the line, otherwise he will make her pay with her life. Princess Mirimah is powerless to resist him and can only start with his eldest son, Murad, to strike at Selim and Nurbanu. She gives a beautiful concubine to her nephew. Murad falls deeply in love with her and trusts Princess Mirimah very much. The two women join forces and try to drive a wedge between Murad and his parents to prevent Nurbanu from becoming the queen mother. Mirimah uses this concubine to slowly torment Nurbanu. Nurbanu is in for a lot of trouble. On the other hand, Princess Mirimah gives a map to Murad. Murad wins the favor of Suleiman with it. Suleiman thinks that this grandson is promising, personally teaches him, and allows him to attend the council meetings. These are all treatments that Selim has never received. Ever since he killed his brother, Selim has been in a state of unease and guilt. He spends his days in his room drinking and doing nothing. Suleiman doesn't even bother to take a second look at him. His Majesty orders the closure of all wineries and bans people on Ottoman territory from drinking alcohol. This causes strong dissatisfaction among the people. When Suleiman goes on an incognito tour, he hears the continuous complaints and mockeries. Suleiman is simply muddle-headed and unjust. He killed the capable princes and is going to hand over the empire to a drunkard. Suleiman is so old that he needs help to go to the toilet, not to mention going on a campaign. These criticisms make Suleiman extremely angry. Mahidevran watches all this from a distance and smiles happily, sighing that Suleiman has finally got his comeuppance. To prove that he is the strongest man in the Ottoman Empire, the Suleiman sets out on a campaign despite great pressure. Perhaps there is also his remorse for executing his son. However, even the strongest of wills cannot defeat sickness and aging. On his deathbed, Suleiman is filled with unwillingness and gives the last mobilization to the soldiers, praying that the empire he has built won't fall into the hands of Selim. Until the end of his life, Suleiman can't close his eyes. Throughout 72 years, his remarkable feats and wrongdoings are etched in the annals of history, left for posterity to evaluate. In 1566, the only surviving son of Suleiman ascends the throne. It was the beginning of the decline of the Ottoman Empire and the prelude to the era of women. In the following nearly 130 years, women in the harem would get involved in politics and influence the historical course of the empire. This is Rainbow Movie. Check out my homepage and you'll see more recaps of the magnificent century. I'm hastening to write and edit the next part, so feel free to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.